All right, so now we want to create that system. Just briefly, let's go over in case you took a little break between videos. We have it now where if we get close to our mushroom, it chases after our player. If we get far enough away, the character will lose interest. But we're not really losing interest. We're just outside of range, and we want to use, we want to have this lose interest range functional. So we're actually like really isolating that functionality. And when that happens, I want the character to go back and move between these waypoints. So let's go to our scripts here. And under NPC, I'm going to right click. I'm going to create another C# script. And I'm just going to call that Waypoint CSS, Waypoint Patrol CSS. And let's open that up in here. So the first thing I need is an array to store all of the positions or the transforms of those waypoints. So on our mushroom enemy here, let's expand that out just a little bit. It's always like a little fight between each one. Let's go ahead and add this script. And because we made it public here, we can go in here and we can just grab each one of these patrols and just drop it on the word waypoint. And now we have access to those two waypoints. The next thing is we need a speed, the patrol speed. Let me go ahead and just type these out and then we'll go through them together. Okay, so we need a patrol speed, and this is really how fast it moves between the waypoints. So you can make this slower, kind of like you watch those action video games, the characters kind of lounging around, and then when they see the main player, they run. And then we need a index. So the way this kind of works is with a these waypoints is you see that there's an element 0 here. This is the index. So what we're saying here is by saying the current waypoint index is set at slot 0. It doesn't really start at 1, even though it says 2 here. This is slot 0 and this is slot 1. So what we're looking for, or we're going to start with, is slot 0 there. And then inside of, I'm just going to copy this because we're really just using the same code in the sense of the rigid body. So what we want to do next is grab this rigid body and save it in here. Now the other thing is, you see where it says waypoint distance? Sorry, I forgot to mention this. As our character gets closer to the waypoint, we really need a number that's just going to say, hey, when we get close enough to this waypoint, we don't want to be directly on it or 0, or our character will just stop. We want to say we're a little off. It'll start going to the next one. And these are all numbers that you're going to have to kind of fiddle with to find a nice balance of gameplay so your game is fun. And this comes part of testing. So let's go ahead and let's see. I'm not going to use update void, or sorry, I'm not going to use update on this. I'm just going to use patrol because we're going to be calling this from another script. And we might be calling it from update. So it's always going to be checking the script anyway. Now let's add some checks in here. So we have, remember, waypoints here. And if our waypoints, sorry, and it's, if our waypoints dot length, this is how we're checking that it's, right now we have two waypoints because we have these two here. The indexing thing only comes when we're searching. Is the same as 0. We're just going to exit out of this. And this should be a capital L. So if you have an error there, it's because you did a lowercase l like me. So we're going to return, which means if we don't have any waypoints, we're just going to exit out of this patrol script. If we do have some, right, this is where our logic is going to be, is we're going to get the position of each one of those waypoints starting at 0. All right, so the first thing we do is we have this transform variable here, and we're just saying target waypoint is the same as whatever the current waypoint index is. And we need to increment this over time, so that we can go 0, then 1. And so it's this variable here is always checking during the patrol if whenever our, like it's always just updating whatever our current waypoint is. If the distance between our character's current position and one of these waypoints is less than the waypoint distance, we're going to take the current waypoint index and we're going to add 1 to it. So this is what's going to move us from 0 to 1. And this thing is called a modulus operator. And what it does is it takes the remainder of whenever you're dividing two numbers. So all we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to add one, and then we're going to find the length. And what this helps us do is it if we don't have any more, it'll take us back to 0, which is our first element of our waypoint. And then this code here is what's actually controlling the movement. So we're creating a variable that's storing two values, and it's just storing the direction. And what it is the direction that we plan on using to move, and that's just the position of our waypoint, which is one of these guys, minus whatever our character position is. And dot normalized, what that does is it just smooths out the movement. Now this line of code is what actually moves our character. So we're going to add velocity. Imagine we're just kind of pushing the physics object, and we're going to move it along the x-axis times how much patrol speed. So we have a patrol speed here, and then this, remember, if you remember before, rigid body dot velocity dot y, just make sure that our character stays in the y position where it's at. So if these are like really high or something, it won't move up. It'll just kind of move between those two positions. Now, none of this is going to work because we're not actually calling this patrol script. Remember, it's grayed out, and we need to do this from our enemy controller. So we want to call this from here so that, like, if we're not chasing our player and if our player is not stopped, we want to have it go between those waypoints. So what we'll do in here is we're going to add another method down here, and this is just going to check whether or not it's true or false our player is if we're chasing our player, because remember this script is attached to our enemy. So I'm just going to call this is chasing player, and I'm going to return really it's a check. So if the velocity of our player on the x-axis, right, of our enemy, sorry, if the velocity of our enemy on the x-axis is not equal to 0, if this means we're currently chasing the player. So what we're saying is if 0, like right now, our velocity on this on the x-axis would be set to 0 because it's not moving. But as this starts to move on the x-axis, there's some sort of numerical value. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another if statement in my update. And all I'm going to do here is say, hey, if we are not chasing this player. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it inside of here. Let's save that for a second. And this is saying if we are chasing the player. What I'm saying is if we are not. That means if we are not moving or we're not chasing the player, what I want to do is I want to go into this waypoint script here. And I want to call this patrol method. So I need a variable up here with that same waypoint patrol name. So I'm just going to start typing out waypoint patrol underscore CSS and then waypoint patrol like this. And we want to make this private for now. And then semicolon. I'm going to grab this, duplicate this line, and then I'm going to grab this script. Oops, that's the wrong line. I do not want to get that line, sorry. I just want to get the component. So I'll do this line here. And the order of these matter. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in a bit. And we want this method here, or we want this variable name here. So I'm going to hold Alt and just press the up arrow. Geez, this is not. There we go. Let's drag this down a little bit. So in any curly-based languages, there's three things. There's sequencing, branching, and it has to have some sort of logical order. Sequencing, which is like reading it from top to bottom, and then branching, and then looping. That means the ability to do something over and over again. So the sequence, for example, with this is I want my waypoints to be loaded. I want to get these waypoints here. And then I want to get the rigid body here. And then what I want to do is I want to find the player. And the reason for this is if I have the waypoints, then I can grab my rigid body here and I could start moving it either towards my waypoint or through my player. So let's save this. And what I'd like to do is use this lose interest range here. And I'd like to change, I think, my update around a little bit, where instead of its distance to player is greater than detection range, we could just do lose interest range here. And I think that's good. And then I also need to use this method here, waypoint patrol. And I need to get this out of here and just say dot patrol to call that patrol method, which might not be public. And that's why we're not seeing it and it's giving me an error here. So let's go back and make sure that we make this public. Public allows us to access this in another script. So I'll save that, and then this should now pop up. Yeah, there it is. So there's a lot of open variables here to test if this character is going to move back and forth. So I'm actually going to take Sally and this ground plane here, just kind of move her off to the side for a second. And then what I want to do is grab my mushroom enemy, and I want to say, okay, my patrol speed is 5. My distance to waypoint I'm going to do is 0.8, so it's going to stop a little bit further away. And my lose interest range, I don't know, we'll make that 5. We got to play with these values. So you can see our character is now moving between those two waypoints. Now if I grab Sally and I move her a little closer, here, let's grab Sally and just move her over this way. Oh, I grabbed Sally art, that's why. So let's do it this way. There we go. So I'm going to move her a little bit off to the side there. I think, let's see, he stopped short, and I wonder if that has to do with this waypoint distance. Yeah, it didn't store. I don't know why it changed it here. Control S, maybe I had that playing. Yeah, so here's my waypoint distance. I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to get closer to this guy and see if he chases me. Yeah, he's chasing me now. Actually, I don't think he's chasing me. Oh, my lose interest rate is 0. Let's change that to 5, maybe. Yeah, so he is following me. He's kind of battling me a little bit. Let's try this again. Okay. Let's scale this out a little bit. So I'm going to stay right here. Yeah, so he's chasing me now, and then if I get away, he goes back to the waypoint system. I think this is going to be a common error, this thing. Let's see. Oh, this is our level manager. Yeah, I mean, we don't have a game manager in the scene, so we're getting that error, and it's okay. So really, that's it for the waypoint system, and that error won't be there when we actually go through the normal channels. We start to set up our level. So I'm actually just going to save this for now, and that way when we come back, I have it handy to show you. But yeah, our waypoint system seems a little bit. I tended to go back in and just comment every line of code if any of this is confusing, or handwrite it, or watch these videos, or just a lot of this stuff is in the Unity documentation. I didn't invent this code. I just, over time, I knew where to plug in or use certain pieces. Our enemy controller script is pretty small, but we have a pretty good system going. Next, what we got to do is we have to script our camera movement system so that it follows our player. And that's when our game truly comes to life, is if we have a nice camera with some nice offset that moves around.